Dacă ne uităm la doar două dintre evenimentele majore contemporane, războiul Rusiei din Ucraina și cutremurele din Turcia și Siria, putem înțelege cât de fragilă este siguranța personală pe care avem tendința să o luăm de-a gata. Ce faci când pierzi totul și singurul lucru care îți mai rămâne este viața? Ceri ajutor. Umanitatea este sentimentul de care nu trebuie să uităm când semenii noștri, indiferent de naționalitate, au nevoie de sprijin. Discutăm despre umanitatea transformată în instituție cu reprezentantul UNHCR în România, Pablo Zapata. Sunt Cristina Cileacu, începe Pașaport diplomatic. Pablo Zapata, UNHCR representative in Romania, welcome to Diplomatic Passport.
Thank you very much for having me.
O secundă. Atât durează ca oamenii să treacă de la vieți obișnuite la reale tragedii. Decizia lui Putin să atace Ucraina sau cutremurul puternic, care a pus la pământ mii de imobile construite fără simț de răspundere în Turcia și Siria, sunt doar două exemple de acțiuni care au transformat fundamental viața milioane de cetățeni. Răspunsul celor care oferă ajutor este imediat, dar pe măsură ce timpul de la începutul evenimentului se îndepărtează, scade implicarea persoanelor particulare, chiar dacă tragedia este în derulare. Cine se ocupă constant de cei rămași fără posibilități de trai?
Pablo, we are seeing a lot of tragedies. People are refugees, people are migrants from various reasons. But let's stop to the two most recent one. First, the war in Ukraine, the war that Russia started in Ukraine, and the second one, the tragedy we saw in Turkey and Syria because of the earthquake. How is it like to mobilize so quickly to help these people?
In UNHCR, unfortunately, this is part of our regular duties in many ways. On the one hand, we have some places like it was Romania before the refugee situation refugees coming from Ukraine, stable offices and a stable part of our work, which relates to supporting governments in fulfilling their obligations under refugee instruments and accompanying the processes of developing systems, etc. And then we have this other part which relates more to responding rapidly to developments of all types. These both really interact. I think the situation in Romania is a good example. This was a fairly small UNHCR operation with well-established partnerships, with collaboration with the government on certain areas, and all this we had to really grow to adapt and to the situation, but also to support better the needs of the country and of the government. So in a way we're used to it.
But give us some examples for people to understand how quickly you can move to help those in need. For instance, if we take the earthquake in Turkey and Syria.
We are able to mobilize every stock that we have. We, as part of our capacity, even some stocks that we have here. For instance, in the case of Romania, over the past weekend, within 24 hours, we were able to send 2 airlifts of family tents, winterization kits. We will continue through road in the coming days to dispose of what we call the surplus stock. So stock that is not necessary to respond to the specific needs of an operation. In our case, of course, that is mostly about the Ukraine crisis. So all what it is above that is going to serve people elsewhere.
Personalitatea unui conducător corupe felul în care este condusă o țară. Nu liderul Turciei a construit clădirile care s-au prăbușit la cutremure, ucigând zeci de mii de oameni, dar sistemul pe care îl îngăduie le-a permis unor constructori interesați doar de bani să facă acele case. Nu liderul Siriei a comandat un cutremur, dar cetățenii din țara sa au avut mai puține șanse de supraviețuire pentru că acesta a vrut să demonstreze lumii că este suficient de puternic și a cerut ajutor cu întârziere.
In case of Turkey, the authorities there asked for help immediately. In case of Syria, rather citizens asked for international help, but the authorities from Damascus were not really eager to receive this help, or reluctant. How do you work in this case? What are the challenges you have to overcome?
So, well, this is an example that I know relatively well. I worked 2.5 years in Syria, in the Syrian Arabic Republic between 2015 and mid-2017, and the way in which UNHCR and other UN agencies we work through a concept that is called the whole of Syria. So some areas of Syria are accessible from one part, other areas of Syria are accessible from a different part. So in the case of the persons affected by this earthquake, there are some part of the population that is directly accessible through our operations, let's say in Damascus, or we have, for instance, field offices in Homs, in Tartus, in Aleppo, sub-office. So in areas where we are already operating, we are able to deliver rapidly. In other areas which are accessible by other colleagues in other parts, for instance from southern Turkey, they access some parts of northern Syria. The situation is more complex, and by the 9th of February, the first UN convoy, of which 12 trucks were UNHCR core relief items, was able to enter. So we adapt according to the reality on the ground, to the limitations and to the possibilities we have.
Usually in cases like this, UNHCR is asking for donation as well from civilian, from whomever can donate. But there are also voices saying that maybe those donations are not reaching to the people that are intended. What is your answer to this?
Well, we are absolutely accountable for what we receive. Every penny is accountable. And the way in which we have to prioritize needs, first and foremost, it is with the communities affected. It is not coming from somewhere in the space and deciding what people need or don't need. Always we start from the communities and the authorities of the areas affected. In matters of emergency, these are very quick consultation processes. For instance, with the authorities of Turkey, it was very straightforward and consultation process, and then the request that came from the authorities to help. In any case, when we have the possibility to establish longer-term programs or sustainable programs, we consult with the communities. For instance, here in Romania, in order to do our planning for 2022, at the same time that we were addressing the emergency, we were able to meet with communities. We were able to do focus group discussions, to meet with some refugee coordinators, refugee leaders, let's say, as well as, of course, with government, and to do what we call a participatory assessment. Then it is the operation that is absolutely accountable for that. In the case of an emergency like the current earthquake, we act in coordination with the national authorities, and in many cases we hand over the assistance or the items to the authorities for them to deliver.
Refugiații care ajung într-un loc sigur, să spunem România, știu că au scăpat de război. Asta nu înseamnă automat că vor să rămână aici pe termen nedefinit. Majoritatea oamenilor care își părăsesc țara împotriva voinței lor sunt împărțiți între nevoia de a o lua de la capăt și gândul la viața pe care au lăsat-o în urmă și speră să o poată recupera cândva.
In case of Ukrainian refugees, it's already 1 year since the Russians started the war there. We saw that Romanian citizens mobilized quickly and received the refugees coming from Ukraine in very good conditions. So did the Romanian state, so did your organization and other private local organization and so on. 1 year later, how are these people integrated, because they are still here in Romania, in the Romanian society, from your point of view?
It is a process. It is a process that has a number of aspects. First and foremost, as you said, the first response of Romania and Romanians was fantastic. Was fantastic not only from a immediate feeling kind of motivation, but also on the official side. The response, and I have said it in other occasions of Romania, was effective, efficient and deeply humane. It was not just by chance. You have an excellent response capacity as a country, which, by the way, always surprises me when I tell Romanian friends about our expert assessment of how the response was. We get this eyes of doubt, really, as not really being fully aware. The capacity of the response in Romania was absolutely outstanding, as well as the view of the authorities to immediately start a process for the medium and longer term. So you had these two streams working hand by hand and reinforcing each other. Your question relates more or less to the second part, 1 year after the increase of facilities. Where are we? And this has 2 or 3 different aspects. I would say, on the one hand, we see from refugees that there is this difficulty in projecting themselves in the longer term outside Ukraine. And we see
So
that
they want to go back home.
they want to go back home, and that in a way prevents some aspects of inclusion. Not necessarily that people do not want to be included, do not want to integrate. It is that you make your own decisions thinking that hopefully in a matter of 2, 3, 5 months you will be back in the country. And that may hamper some decision taking, for instance, in terms of enrolling kids in a school, of looking for permanent ways of sustaining the family in terms of livelihoods. So there are a number of personal decisions that need some time, if you will, to settle in the mind of persons. Just sharing some of my personal experience. I grew up as a refugee child. Myself, I'm originally from Chile, and my family comes from Spain, so we moved in the early 70s after the coup d'etat from Chile to Spain. And we could see, and I could see among my friends, that there were some that were all the time thinking, no, we're going back, we're going back, we're going back, and others that took a decision to say, well, we do not know when we will go back. We would love to go back, but in the meantime we will act as if we were going to stay here longer. And I think we are somehow in that part of the process. So that's one element. On the other hand, there is the element of availability of resources for inclusion. Romania did something which was the first one at the EU level to do, and not only the EU, wider European context to do, which was a concrete plan of measures for protection and inclusion of refugees. And it goes area by area in all the critical areas, also with some cross-cutting measures. We were part of that process of consultation. We were happy to put our coordination structures which respond to the government at the service of the drafting of that plan. And we are happy to align our own action with the fulfillment of that plan. And there you have very specifically the areas where specific actions are needed. And some of them are, I would say, attainable in the shorter term. Others require some more structural changes. Sometimes we tend to see issues of refugees in terms of numbers, and we say, well, this is the number, this is the other number, so it is easier, as if some of the processes were easier or difficult depending on the number. Really the issue that keeps coming, not only on health, but if you see in every aspect, is the issue of language. So one of the things we need to do is not only this piecemeal or actor by actor, I am doing my work on providing language courses or in getting interpreters and translators. I think for some of these aspects, one of them is language, interpretation and communication, but there are others.
Prea mulți bani pentru refugiați în vreme ce ai noștri mor de foame. Acest tip de discurs provoacă ură și nu folosește nimănui. Problemele sociale din România existau și înainte de venirea refugiaților din Ucraina. Vor exista probabil și după ce ei vor pleca. Dacă ceva nu funcționează într-o țară, nu este vina unui nou venit.
I mentioned, and you sustained this idea about how well Romania received the refugees, but in the meantime, in this year that passed since the refugees from Ukraine start arriving in Romania, we start to hear as well voices saying that too many resources are directed towards those refugees, and perhaps we should help more our Romanians living in less good conditions. What would you say to these people?
I would say that there are many ways of supporting everyone, and this is very much in the forefront of our action. How to ensure what we call social cohesion, and that the host communities also benefit from the presence of refugees. So, for instance, if we are going to do collectively, UNHCR plus the other UN agencies, plus national and international NGOs, some contributions to the education system or to the health system, these will benefit eventually all the persons that need to access these systems, not only refugees. So that's one way of looking at it. The other is more on the funding side. There are different ways of funding measures. So for instance, in our case, the funding that we put at the disposal of the programs in Romania comes specifically from different sources that are not the sources of the state budget. We do not receive direct funding, let's say, from the state budget, but Romania has made a very generous contribution in general for the Ukraine situation. I have normally observed is that there is an official, if you will, and a legal component of protection, but the protection really happens at the neighborhood level, at the street level, with the people that we meet, and the lives of both the hosts and those who are hosted are impacted and changed because of that. And these voices are not as heard as the critical voices. So on our side, what we are looking into is how to project publicly the message of thanks that refugees express very much when we meet on daily basis with them, and how to make it very concrete for the people who have hosted refugees to hear that, and at the same time how to encourage sustaining the effort.
The image of refugee in general, not only here in Romania, is an image of a victim. We tend to forget that these people that become refugees against their will used to have their own lives, used to have their own professions, and so on. How can this image be changed at the level of the people from the hosting countries?
I think it's a matter of making the effort of just looking things from and I shouldn't say this for a TV interview, but only behind the screen and get personally involved. That makes a big difference. And then refugees
meet these people,
to meet, to interact, and to see also the benefit that they bring to my life and to the life of my family. It is very important, the way we see it, to demystify being a refugee. Not all persons are equal. Not all refugees are equal. There are refugees that came here with more resources. There are refugees who came with less resources. For instance, what we have seen is that the people arriving in the winter months, there are people who had made also a decision to remain in Ukraine and are forced because of the attacks on civilian energetic infrastructure, come with a different reality, come with less resources, come from different areas of the country. They come already after 1 year of enduring bombing and being in basements and listening to the sirens. There is this perception that sometimes instilled in the first days or weeks of the crisis, of people coming in relatively comfortable situation, but this is not the only reality about refugees. And what we are doing on our side is to try to focus more and more and more on those more and more vulnerable. And we are doing this in hand by hand also with the authorities, trying to look at the elements of specific protection needs and how to address those.
Recent, o barcă cu refugiații în care erau și copii s-a făcut țândări aproape de coasta Italiei și toți ocupanții ei au murit. Este o rușine că în secolul 21 Europa nu reușește încă să găsească formule legale pentru ca migrația ilegală să fie diminuată și apar în continuare idei precum construcția de garduri la granițe. Oamenii care nu mai au nimic de pierdut în afară de propria viață nu pot fi opriți de garduri, iar Europa civilizată poate găsi soluții mai bune pentru ca nimeni să nu mai moară la frontierele ei.
If we look now at the European Union, this is not a matter of refugees necessarily, it's rather reflecting the response to illegal migration. There are some thoughts from various countries of Europe that maybe we should start building fences. You have more experience in working with refugees and migrants. Fences don't really work in protecting a country in front of a wave of people trying to save their lives. What kind of responses, better responses, you can share with the European Union to not solve, but at least to control this phenomenon?
Unfortunately, in UNHCR, we are very well aware of the consequences of fences. I have been in fences in some parts of Europe, and I've seen people with parts of their body absolutely mutilated trying to cross those fences. And some of these persons are coming because they cannot remain in the country, because they would be persecuted for who they are or what they believe in, and other persons come for very compelling economic reasons. Nobody really goes through that experience voluntarily and happily, if I may say so. It is out of necessity. And out of necessity, the response, in the view of the High Commissioner, he has expressed it very, very vividly and eloquently recently, is more and more solidarity. It is not necessary more and more fences. On the one hand, there are some obligations of countries to uphold their asylum laws, their international commitments on the matter of asylum, and have fully functioning asylum systems that are able to offer protection and enable refugees to integrate in the societies and eventually to return to the countries of origin when the time comes. And there are areas that need to be continuously explored in terms of cooperation with countries of origin, with countries of transit. This is not a solution that will require only one part if other parts are not considered. And this consideration of countries of origin and countries of transit need to be quite inclusive. It's not about only holding facilities or centers. It is also about generating dignified conditions in centers where people can actually rebuild and try to rebuild their lives. But it's also about how European countries and other industrialized countries relate to countries of origin of persons that come from a variety of reasons. We have in UNHCR been very supportive of the draft Pact on Migration and Asylum of the European Union. There are very concrete measures in that draft that refers to proper screening, to safeguards to ensure that the asylum systems actually deal with the persons in need of international protection and that the migrants receive the treatment according to the relevant legal frameworks that they are entitled to receive, that everybody meets their obligations. Sometimes we speak a lot about rights, but also there are obligations on everybody's side.
Atât pentru astăzi, dar rămânem în continuare online pe pagina de Facebook a emisiunii și pe contul nostru de Twitter. Revenim cu subiecte noi din lumea diplomației și a politicii externe, vinerea viitoare de la 11:30 și în reluare sâmbătă după miezul nopții. La revedere!